Welcome to Tale Grove, where every story grows roots, and every lesson touches the heart.
The music was soft and elegant, floating across the beautiful white wedding tent set up in the center of the city park. Crystal lights sparkled above hundreds of well-dressed guests. Waiters carried silver trays filled with roasted chicken, rice, sweet cakes, and expensive drinks. Everything looked perfect. Everything looked rich. But outside the bright tent, standing in the shadows, Naomi watched quietly. Her stomach twisted painfully. She hadn't eaten a real meal in 2 days. From where she stood, she could smell the food. Warm rice. Grilled chicken. Fresh bread. The smell alone made her feel dizzy. Just one plate, she thought. That's all I need. Naomi looked down at her torn jeans and worn shoes. She knew she didn't belong here. The people inside wore expensive dresses and suits. Their laughter sounded like music she could never join. But hunger doesn't care about pride. Slowly, she slipped inside the tent, keeping her head low. No one noticed at first. Everyone was too busy celebrating, taking pictures, laughing loudly. Naomi moved carefully toward the long buffet table. Her heart pounded. Just take the food and leave. She quickly grabbed a plate and placed rice and chicken on it with shaking hands. But just as she turned to walk away, a strong hand grabbed her wrist. "Hey! What do you think you're doing?" a deep voice shouted. Naomi froze. The security guard stood behind her, gripping her arm tightly. His face was full of anger. "She's stealing," he yelled loudly. Suddenly the music stopped. Guests turned their heads one by one, whispering as they stared at the thin girl holding the plate of food. "A thief at a wedding," someone muttered. "Call the police," another guest shouted. Naomi's heart raced, but her face stayed calm. She had learned something important from life on the streets. Never show fear. "I was just hungry," she said quietly. The guard tightened his grip. "That's not your food," he snapped. The crowd grew larger around. Curious eyes watching the scene like it was unexpected entertainment. Some guests looked angry. Others looked uncomfortable. But no one stepped forward to help her. Naomi lifted her chin and looked directly at the guard. "Please," she said softly. "Just let me go." Before the guard could answer, a new voice suddenly cut through the crowd. "Wait." The single word was calm, but powerful. Everyone turned. The groom was walking toward them. He looked tall and confident in his perfectly tailored white suit. Tonight was supposed to be the happiest night of his life. But as he approached the girl, something in his expression changed. His eyes narrowed slightly. He stared at Naomi's face as if he had seen it somewhere before. Then he said slowly, "Let her go." The security guard looked confused. "But sir, she was stealing." "I said," the groom repeated firmly, "let her go." The guard released Naomi's wrist. For a moment, the entire wedding stood in silence. The groom stepped closer, studying the hungry girl's face carefully. "Tell me something," he said softly. Naomi met his eyes, confused. "What's your name?" She hesitated for a second before answering. "Naomi." The groom suddenly went still. And the way he looked at her made the crowd realize something strange was happening. Because the groom wasn't looking at her like a thief. He was looking at her like a ghost from his past. The entire wedding tent had fallen into an uncomfortable silence. Hundreds of guests stood frozen, their attention fixed on the strange scene unfolding near the buffet table. The groom, dressed in his spotless white suit, stood face to face with a thin, hungry girl holding a plate of stolen food. Naomi could still feel the pressure from the security guard's grip on her wrist, but now his hand had loosened. Because the groom had ordered it. "Jordan." That was his name. Everyone in the city knew it. Successful businessman. Wealthy family. The man who was supposed to be celebrating the happiest day of his life tonight. But right now, he wasn't smiling. He was staring at Naomi like something didn't make sense. "Sir," the security guard said nervously, "this girl was stealing food from the wedding." Jordan didn't look away from Naomi. "I heard you," he replied calmly. The guard shifted uncomfortably. "Should I call the police?" A few guests nodded in agreement. "Yes, call them," someone whispered. But Jordan raised a hand slightly. "No," he said quietly. "There's no need for that." Naomi blinked in surprise. People rarely defended someone like her. Jordan took a small step closer, studying her face more carefully. Something about her eyes made his chest feel tight. Dark eyes. Sharp. Strong. Familiar. Why does she look so familiar? He wondered. "What's your name?" he asked again gently. Naomi hesitated, unsure why this rich stranger seemed so interested. "Naomi," she repeated. The name lingered in the air. Jordan felt something strange stir inside his memory, like an old photograph buried deep in his mind. But before he could think further. "Jordan." The sharp voice cut through the silence. A beautiful woman in a sparkling white wedding dress pushed through the crowd. Her long veil trailed behind her as she walked quickly toward them, her face flushed with anger and embarrassment. This was Esther. The bride. "Jordan, what is going on?" she demanded, lowering her voice but unable to hide her frustration. "Why are you talking to her?" She glanced at Naomi with clear disgust. The torn clothes. The dusty shoes. The plate of stolen food. "She's ruining the wedding," Esther whispered sharply. "Tell security to take her away." The security guard straightened, ready to act again. But Jordan didn't move. Instead, he kept staring at Naomi. His mind was racing. There was something about her face, the shape of her eyes, the way she held her chin high despite everyone staring at her. It reminded him of someone. Someone from long ago. Esther grabbed his arm impatiently. "Jordan," she insisted, "everyone is watching. Just make her leave." Jordan slowly pulled his arm away. "I just want to ask her a few questions," he said quietly. Esther looked stunned. "Questions?" she repeated. "About what?" Jordan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked directly at Naomi again. "Where are you from?" he asked softly. Naomi frowned. "What does that matter?" Jordan hesitated, trying to explain something he didn't fully understand himself. "I'm not sure," he admitted slowly. "But I feel like I've seen you before." A few guests exchanged confused glances. Naomi crossed her arms defensively. "That's impossible," she said. "People like you don't see people like me." For a moment, Jordan had no reply. Because deep down, he knew she might be right. Still, that strange feeling in his chest refused to go away. He looked at her again, searching her face carefully. And the more he looked, the more certain he felt. Something about this girl was connected to his past. He just didn't know how. Yet. The silence inside the wedding tent slowly turned into whispers. Guests leaned toward each other, murmuring behind their hands. Some looked amused, others uncomfortable, but everyone was watching the same thing, the groom standing calmly in front of a homeless girl while his bride looked furious. Esther could feel the heat rising in her face. This was supposed to be the perfect wedding. The perfect night. The perfect beginning to her life with Jordan. Instead, the entire celebration had stopped because of a girl who didn't even belong there. She stepped closer, her white heels clicking sharply against the floor. "Jordan," she said through clenched teeth, forcing a polite smile for the watching guests, "I think this situation has gone on long enough. Jordan didn't answer. His eyes were still fixed on Naomi. Esther's patience snapped. She stole food, Esther continued louder, pointing at the plate in Naomi's hands. Why are we still talking about this? Naomi felt dozens of eyes staring at her. But she refused to look down. Instead, she met Esther's gaze calmly. I didn't steal jewelry, Naomi said quietly. I took food. A few guests exchanged awkward glances. Esther's smile disappeared completely. That's still stealing, she snapped. Naomi shrugged slightly. Maybe, she replied. But hunger makes people do things they normally wouldn't. The words made the room uncomfortable. Some guests suddenly found the floor very interesting. Others avoided Naomi's eyes completely. But Esther wasn't interested in feeling guilty. This is ridiculous, she said sharply, turning to the security guard. Why is she still here? The guard hesitated, glancing nervously at Jordan. Well, the groom asked me to. I don't care what he asked, Esther interrupted. This is my wedding too. She turned back to Jordan. Jordan, tell him to take her outside. Jordan finally looked at her. But his expression wasn't angry. It was thoughtful. I just want to know something first, he said calmly. Esther stared at him in disbelief. You want to know something, she repeated. Jordan, she's a thief, not a guest. Naomi let out a small breath. You know, she said quietly, it's interesting. Esther frowned. What is? Naomi gestured lightly toward the long buffet table behind them, still filled with untouched food. There's enough food here to feed 100 people, she said. But everyone is angry because one hungry girl took a plate. A few guests shifted uncomfortably. Esther's jaw tightened. This is not a charity event, she replied coldly. Naomi nodded slowly. No, she said. I can see that. Jordan felt something twist painfully in his chest. He glanced at the plate Naomi was still holding. Rice. Chicken. Simple food. Food that probably meant nothing to most people here. But to her, it clearly meant survival. Esther noticed the way Jordan was looking at the girl and felt a sudden wave of frustration. Jordan, she said firmly, people are starting to stare. He glanced around. She was right. The guests were no longer whispering. They were watching. Waiting. What exactly are you trying to figure out? Esther demanded. Jordan looked back at Naomi slowly. I'm trying to understand, he said quietly, why she feels familiar. Naomi gave a small laugh. That's impossible, she replied. But deep inside, something strange stirred in her memory too. Because for some reason, looking at Jordan also felt oddly familiar. And neither of them knew why. The wedding guests had grown unusually quiet. The laughter and music that once filled the tent were gone, replaced by whispers and curious stares. At the center of it all stood Jordan and Naomi, facing each other like two strangers connected by an invisible thread neither of them understood. Jordan couldn't stop staring. The longer he looked at Naomi's face, the stronger the strange feeling inside him grew. It wasn't just familiarity anymore. It was something deeper, something emotional. Like a memory trying to wake up after sleeping for years. Naomi shifted uncomfortably under his gaze. Why are you looking at me like that? She asked quietly. Jordan hesitated before answering. I'm not sure, he admitted. He rubbed the back of his neck, confused by his own thoughts. It just feels like I should know you. Naomi let out a small breath. That's impossible, she said. We don't live in the same world. Jordan opened his mouth to respond, but suddenly something caught his attention. As Naomi adjusted the collar of her worn shirt, the fabric slipped slightly off her shoulder. And for just a moment, Jordan saw it. A small scar. It was faint but clear, shaped almost like a tiny star. Jordan's heart skipped a beat. His eyes widened. No, it can't be. A memory flashed through his mind like lightning. A sunny afternoon. 2 children playing in a backyard. A little girl crying after falling off her bicycle. Blood on her shoulder. A star-shaped scar. Jordan's breathing became uneven. Wait, he whispered. Naomi noticed the sudden change in his expression. What? She asked cautiously. Jordan stepped closer, his voice shaking slightly. Your shoulder, he said. How did you get that scar? Naomi frowned. This? She asked, touching it casually. I fell off a bike when I was little, she replied. I don't really remember much. I was about 6 or 7. Jordan felt the world tilt beneath his feet. 6 or 7. The same age. The same accident. The same scar. Before he could say anything, a gentle but trembling voice spoke from behind him. Jordan. He turned around. His grandmother, Mrs. Chen, was slowly walking toward them. Her silver hair shimmered under the lights, but her face had turned pale. She had been watching everything from the edge of the crowd. And now her eyes were fixed on Naomi. Not with anger. Not with judgment. But with shock. Grandma? Jordan asked softly. Mrs. Chen stepped closer, studying Naomi carefully. Her wise eyes moved from Naomi's face, to her posture, then finally to the scar on her shoulder. Her hand began to tremble. No, she whispered. Jordan felt his heart pounding harder. What is it? He asked. Mrs. Chen looked at him, then back at Naomi again. Her voice came out barely louder than a breath. Jordan, look at her carefully. He already was. Every second that passed made the memory clearer in his mind. The little girl from his childhood. The one he thought he lost forever. Mrs. Chen slowly placed a hand over her mouth. Tears began to form in her eyes. This can't be possible, she murmured. Naomi looked between them, confused and uneasy. What are you talking about? She asked. Jordan's voice trembled as he spoke. There's someone I lost a long time ago, he said quietly. He took a deep breath. A little sister, who died in a car accident. The crowd leaned in closer. Mrs. Chen's voice shook as she whispered the words that made the entire moment feel unreal. Jordan. She looked directly at Naomi. I think she's standing right in front of you. The wedding tent had transformed from a place of celebration into a theater of disbelief. Guests whispered frantically, some covering their mouths, others wide-eyed, unsure of what they were witnessing. At the center stood Naomi, small but defiant, clutching a plate of stolen food, and Jordan, his expression a mix of astonishment, confusion, and something deeper, something that stirred long-buried memories. Jordan's chest tightened. His eyes darted to Naomi's shoulder again, tracing the faint star-shaped scar that had unlocked a flood of memories. Childhood games, a backyard laughter long forgotten, a little girl with a stuffed elephant named Peanut, and a boy, himself, trying to protect her. Every detail returned like pieces of a puzzle suddenly fitting together. Naomi, he whispered, voice breaking. It can't be, is it really you? Naomi froze, confusion and fear battling with a strange sense of recognition. I don't understand, she said softly. Who are you? Why do you look at me like that? Jordan took a hesitant step closer, his voice catching in his throat. I'm Jordan. Your brother. A murmur ran through the crowd. Guests exchanged shocked glances. Some gasped aloud. Others fell silent, their plates of untouched food forgotten. Naomi's mind spun. Brother? That word felt impossible. Her parents had died in a car crash when she was 7. She had grown up believing she was alone, wandering streets, surviving day by day. And now, This stranger, this rich man in a perfect suit, was saying something she had never imagined. "Your brother," Naomi repeated, her voice barely audible. "But, he died. My brother died in the accident with our parents." Jordan shook his head, tears forming in his eyes. "No. I was taken to another hospital. You were taken somewhere else. They told me you were gone. I mourned for you every single day, Naomi. Every day I wished I could see you again." Mrs. Chen stepped forward, trembling, her silver hair glinting under the chandeliers. "The hospitals made a mistake," she said, her voice soft but heavy with emotion. "Jordan, you were told your sister died. Naomi, you were told your brother died. But you were both wrong." Naomi's hands went to her chest. Her heart pounded so loudly it felt like everyone could hear it. The crowd watched in complete silence, every eye on the scene as if the very air had thickened with shock. Jordan took her hands gently in his. "I remember everything. The backyard, the games, your laugh, your stuffed elephant, Peanut. That scar on your shoulder. I never forgot it." Naomi's tears threatened to spill. The weight of years lost, of life spent in survival, collided with the revelation that she had not been alone all these years. Guests murmured in disbelief. Some whispered apologies under their breath. Others just stared, frozen by the impossibility of what they were witnessing. Esther, Jordan's bride, clutched his arm, pale and trembling. But even she couldn't deny the truth in his eyes. Naomi's voice finally broke the silence, soft but clear. "All these years, we were told lies. And now, you're here." Jordan's voice cracked as he replied, "I'm here, Naomi. I never stopped looking for you. And now, we have a chance to be together again." The tent felt suspended in time, every guest holding their breath as the impossible reality settled. A sister lost and found, a family torn apart by tragedy, and a reunion that defied belief. The wedding celebration had slowly faded into a distant murmur behind them. Jordan, Naomi, and Mrs. Chen now sat in a quiet corner of the garden outside the tent. Lanterns swayed gently in the evening breeze, casting soft golden light across their faces. The festive music from inside sounded far away, almost unreal compared to the heavy silence that surrounded the three of them. Naomi sat stiffly on the wooden bench, her fingers wrapped tightly around the edge as if she needed something solid to hold on to. Her mind felt like a storm of memories, questions, and emotions. Across from her, Jordan leaned forward, his eyes fixed on her face as if he were afraid she might disappear again. Finally, Mrs. Chen sighed deeply. "There is something both of you deserve to know," she said quietly. Jordan straightened. "Grandma, what really happened after the accident?" Mrs. Chen's hands trembled slightly as she folded them in her lap. For a moment she stared down at the ground, gathering the courage to speak. "That night," she began slowly, "the accident was worse than anyone realized. Your parents, they didn't survive. But you two children were still alive when the ambulances arrived." Naomi swallowed hard, her chest tightening. "You were taken to two different hospitals," Mrs. Chen continued. "The city was chaotic that night. Records were mixed up, names were written incorrectly, and the authorities struggled to keep track of everyone." Jordan's jaw clenched. "But someone should have fixed the mistake." "They tried," Mrs. Chen said softly. "But by the time I reached the hospital where you were taken, Jordan, they told me Naomi had already passed away. They said her injuries were too severe." Jordan's eyes widened in shock. "So you believed it?" Mrs. Chen nodded slowly. "I had no reason not to. I was grieving, confused, and desperate to protect the only grandchild I believed I had left." Naomi's voice shook. "And me?" Mrs. Chen looked up at her, guilt filling her eyes. At the hospital where Naomi was taken, the staff believed her brother had died. Without family records properly confirmed, they placed her into the foster system. By the time the paperwork errors were discovered, it was too late. Naomi had already disappeared into the system. Naomi felt a tear slide down her cheek. So, all those years, she whispered, I thought my whole family was gone. Jordan's fists tightened. And I grew up believing the same thing about you. The painful truth hung in the air between them like a heavy fog. Mrs. Chen's voice cracked as she spoke again. I searched for years, she admitted. But the system failed us. Records vanished. Names changed. Eventually. I was told there was no trace left. Naomi wiped her tears, staring at the ground. All the loneliness of her childhood, every cold night, every moment of survival, suddenly it had a reason. Not abandonment. A terrible mistake. Jordan leaned forward gently, his voice filled with emotion. But now we know the truth. Naomi slowly lifted her eyes to meet his. For the first time in her life, the past finally made sense, even if the pain of it still lingered. The music inside the wedding hall had stopped completely. What was meant to be the happiest moment of the evening had turned into something no one could have imagined. Guests who once laughed and celebrated now stood quietly, whispering among themselves. Every pair of eyes slowly turned toward Naomi. She stood near the center of the hall, still wearing the same worn clothes that had made everyone judge her only minutes earlier. Her hands trembled slightly, but her eyes carried a calm strength that hadn't been there before. Jordan stood beside her, silently offering support. Esther, the bride, watched from a few steps away. The anger on her face had softened, replaced with confusion and embarrassment. She had shouted at Naomi earlier, calling her a thief, humiliating her in front of everyone. Naomi took a slow breath. I never meant to ruin your wedding, she said quietly, her voice echoing through the silent room. No one spoke. I was just hungry. Her words were simple, but they carried a weight that made the room feel heavier. When you live on the streets, Naomi continued, every meal feels like survival. Sometimes you do things you're not proud of, not because you're bad, but because you're trying to stay alive. Some guests lowered their heads. Naomi looked around the room at the expensive decorations, the overflowing tables of food, and the shining lights above. Today I learned something strange, she said softly. The same people who have everything, can sometimes forget how it feels to have nothing. The words made several guests shift uncomfortably. Jordan watched her with quiet pride. Naomi then turned toward Esther. I understand why you were angry, she said gently. From your view, I was just a stranger stealing food from your wedding. Anyone might react the same way. Esther's face flushed with guilt. But today also showed something important, Naomi added. Before you judge someone, you should ask why they're struggling. The room remained completely silent. Naomi's voice grew steadier. Not every poor person is lazy. Not every hungry person is a thief. And sometimes, the person you ignore today might be someone connected to your life in ways you never expected. Jordan glanced at her, realizing how true those words were. Naomi finally gave a small, sad smile. I didn't come here to cause trouble, she said. But maybe my mistake brought a lesson we all needed. She looked around the hall one last time. Kindness costs nothing, she said softly. But for someone who has nothing, it can mean everything. For a moment, no one moved. Then slowly, the weight of her words began settling into the hearts of everyone listening. And the wedding guests realized that the most important moment of the night had nothing to do with the ceremony, but with the truth spoken by the girl they had judged too quickly. For several long seconds after Naomi finished speaking, the wedding hall remained completely silent. Her words seemed to echo through the decorated room, touching hearts that only moments earlier had been filled with judgment. The guests looked at one another, unsure of what to say. Some of them slowly glanced toward the large buffet tables. Plates of untouched food were stacked high, more than enough to feed everyone in the hall twice over. And suddenly, that food didn't feel like celebration anymore. It felt like responsibility. Jordan stepped forward quietly. His expression was thoughtful, but there was also a new determination in his eyes. He looked at Naomi, then at the rows of tables, and finally at the hundreds of guests gathered inside. "Naomi is right," he said calmly. His voice broke the heavy silence. "All of this food," he gestured toward the tables, "will probably be thrown away tonight once the party ends." A murmur spread through the crowd. Jordan shook his head. "But outside these doors," he continued, "there are people who haven't eaten all day." Several guests shifted uncomfortably. Jordan looked toward the volunteers who had been organizing the wedding. "Instead of letting this food go to waste," he said, "why don't we turn this wedding into something bigger?" The room grew quiet again. Then Jordan spoke the words that changed everything. "Let's share it." Naomi blinked in surprise. Jordan continued, his voice growing stronger. "We have enough food here to feed an entire neighborhood. So why not invite them? Why not help the people who need it most?" For a moment, no one reacted. Then an older guest slowly began clapping. Another joined. Then another. Within seconds, the entire hall filled with applause. The mood of the wedding began to transform. Volunteers quickly moved toward the buffet tables, organizing containers and preparing food for distribution. Guests rolled up their sleeves, helping pack meals and carry trays. Toward the entrance. Some guests even began calling local shelters and community groups. Word spread quickly outside. Within an hour, families from nearby streets started arriving, hesitant at first, unsure if the invitation was real. But it was. Jordan stood near the entrance welcoming people personally. Naomi watched everything unfold in disbelief. Children laughed as they received warm meals. Elderly neighbors smiled gratefully. People who had felt invisible only hours earlier were now being treated with kindness and dignity. The wedding hall that once held only wealthy guests now welcomed everyone. Naomi felt tears form in her eyes. Jordan stepped beside her. "Funny," he said softly. "You came here looking for one plate of food." Naomi smiled gently. "And now hundreds of people are eating." The music slowly started playing again, but this time the celebration felt different. It was no longer just about two people getting married. It had become something far more powerful. A night of compassion. A night of unity. And a reminder that sometimes the most beautiful celebrations are the ones that include everyone. The wedding hall was still alive with activity, laughter, and the sound of people sharing meals together. Outside, the night air had grown cooler, and the glowing lanterns hanging along the garden path swayed gently in the breeze. Naomi stepped outside the hall quietly. She needed a moment to breathe. The evening had been overwhelming, first the hunger, then the humiliation, the shocking discovery about her past, and now the unbelievable kindness spreading through the wedding celebration. It all felt like a dream she hadn't fully woken up from. She walked slowly toward the garden fountain and sat down on its edge. The water trickled softly, creating a calm rhythm in the quiet night. For most of her life, Naomi had learned to survive alone. She had never allowed herself to believe in things like family, safety, or belonging. Those were luxuries other people had. But tonight, everything had changed. Footsteps approached from behind. Naomi didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Jordan stopped a few steps away, watching her carefully. For a moment, neither of them spoke. There were too many emotions, too many lost years between them. Finally, Jordan broke the silence. "Do you remember the old mango tree behind our house?" he asked gently. Naomi slowly turned toward him, surprised. Her eyes widened. "You mean the one we used to climb when Grandma wasn't watching?" she replied quietly. Jordan smiled. "That's the one." Naomi let out a soft laugh, the first real laugh she had felt in years. "I fell from that tree once," she said. "You told Grandma it was your fault so I wouldn't get in trouble." Jordan nodded. I remember. You cried for hours. The memories felt distant, like old photographs slowly coming back into focus. Naomi's smile faded slightly as emotion filled her chest. All those years, she whispered. I thought you were gone. Jordan stepped closer. And I thought the same about you. For a moment, the weight of those lost years hung between them. So many birthdays missed. So many moments they should have shared. But somehow, fate had brought them back together. Jordan gently held out his hand. Maybe we can't change the past, he said softly. But we can start again. Naomi looked at his hand. For a long moment, she hesitated, not because she didn't want to accept it, but because she was afraid this moment might disappear if she moved too quickly. Finally, she reached out and took his hand. The simple gesture felt powerful. Not just forgiveness. Not just reunion. Family. Jordan pulled her into a warm embrace, holding her tightly as if he never wanted to lose her again. Naomi closed her eyes, letting the tears fall freely. For the first time in many years, she was no longer alone. And for both of them, the future suddenly felt full of hope. The joyful sounds from the wedding hall slowly faded into the quiet night. Laughter, music, and the clatter of plates could still be heard faintly from inside, but out in the garden everything felt peaceful and still. Jordan and Naomi were sitting near the fountain where they had reunited only minutes earlier. The lanterns hanging from the trees cast a warm golden glow across the garden, reflecting gently on the moving water. For the first time that evening, neither of them felt rushed. They simply sat together. Brother and sister. After years of separation. Jordan looked over at Naomi. Even under the soft lights, he could see the tiredness in her face, the kind of exhaustion that only comes from years of struggling alone. Naomi, he said gently, you don't have to go back to the streets anymore. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she watched the water flowing in the fountain. I have a home, Jordan continued. A real home. And now that I know you're alive, it's yours too. Naomi's heart tightened. Part of her wanted to say yes immediately. To accept the offer, to step into a life she had once dreamed of. But another part of her, the part shaped by years of survival, hesitated. You're kind, she said softly. But things aren't that simple. Jordan frowned slightly. What do you mean? Naomi slowly stood up, brushing her hands against her worn jacket. For most of my life, I've learned how to survive on my own, she explained. The streets taught me things, hard things. Jordan stood as well. But you're not alone anymore, he insisted. Naomi looked at him, her eyes full of emotion. I know, she said. And that means more to me than you understand. She took a step closer. But tonight isn't just about us finding each other again. Jordan waited, confused. Naomi gestured toward the wedding hall, where volunteers and guests were still helping feed people from the neighborhood. You started something important tonight, she said quietly. People helping strangers. Sharing what they have. Jordan nodded slowly. And? Naomi smiled faintly. There are still people out there who are hungry. People who feel invisible, just like I did. Jordan suddenly understood what she was trying to say. You want to help them, he said. Naomi nodded. If I come with you right now, I'll be safe, she admitted. But the streets are full of people who don't have that chance. A soft breeze moved through the garden. Jordan felt a mixture of pride and sadness. You're really leaving? He asked. Not forever, Naomi replied gently. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small folded piece of paper. I wrote down a place where volunteers sometimes gather to help the homeless. I'll be there. Jordan took the paper carefully. Naomi stepped back toward the garden path. For a moment, the two siblings simply looked at each other again, two lives that had been lost for years and found again in one unbelievable night. Take care of yourself, Jordan said quietly. Naomi smiled warmly. I will. Then she turned and walked slowly into the darkness beyond the lantern lights. Jordan stood there watching her go. He didn't stop her. Because deep down, he knew something important. Naomi hadn't disappeared again. This time, she had chosen her own path. The night had finally grown quiet. The wedding celebration was over, the last guests had left, and the beautiful hall that had once been filled with laughter and music now stood almost empty. Workers slowly cleaned the tables, folding decorations and gathering leftover dishes. But Jordan wasn't inside. He sat alone on the stone bench near the garden fountain, the same place where he and Naomi had spoken earlier that night. The lantern still glowed softly above him, casting long shadows across the garden path. In his hand was the small folded piece of paper Naomi had given him before she left. For hours, he had simply stared at it. Part of him was afraid to open it. Because once he did, the moment would become real. His sister had come back into his life after years of believing she was gone. And then she had walked away again. Jordan finally took a deep breath and slowly unfolded the paper. But instead of a simple address like he expected, he saw something else. A letter. His eyebrows furrowed as he began reading. Jordan. If you are reading this, it means you waited long enough for the night to grow quiet. I knew you would. Jordan blinked in surprise. He continued reading. You probably thought this paper only had an address. But I wanted to say something first, something I didn't have the courage to say face to face. Jordan leaned back slightly, the lantern light reflecting off the page. When I found out tonight that you were my brother, it felt like the world suddenly returned something I had lost forever. His chest tightened. For years, I believed I had no family. I believed I was alone in the world. But tonight showed me something different. Jordan swallowed. You didn't look at me like the others did. You didn't see a thief or a homeless girl. You saw someone worth protecting. A small tear rolled down Jordan's cheek. And for that, I will always be grateful. Jordan's fingers tightened slightly on the letter. But there is something you must understand, the letter continued. The streets may have taken many things from me, but they also gave me something, a purpose. Jordan exhaled slowly. There are people out there who feel the same hunger, the same loneliness, the same invisible pain I carried for years. The words felt powerful. Tonight, you helped feed hundreds of people. You showed them kindness. But kindness should not only exist during celebrations. Jordan nodded slowly to himself. That's why I left tonight, the letter explained. Not because I don't want a family, but because I finally know what I want to do with my life. Jordan reached the final lines. If you truly want to see me again, follow the address written below. Not tomorrow. Not next week. But when you are ready to help people the way we did tonight. Jordan looked down. At the very bottom of the page, beneath the letter, was a small handwritten address. He stared at it quietly. Then a small smile slowly appeared on his face. Because Naomi hadn't truly said goodbye. She had left him something else. An invitation. Not just to find his sister again. But to become part of something bigger than either of them had ever imagined. The garden had grown completely quiet. The lantern still glowed softly above the fountain, but the joyful noise of the wedding had faded into silence. Chairs were empty, tables had been cleared, and the celebration that once filled the night with excitement was now just a memory. Jordan remained seated on the stone bench, the letter still resting in his hands. He read Naomi's words again. Slowly. Carefully. Every sentence carried a meaning that felt deeper than before. For years, Jordan had believed success meant something simple, building a career, owning a beautiful home, hosting grand celebrations like the wedding that had taken place tonight. But Naomi's story had changed something inside him. A girl who once stole food just to survive had walked into his life again, not with anger, not with bitterness, but with a purpose. Jordan looked up at the quiet street beyond the garden gates. Somewhere out there, Naomi was walking through the same city that had once forgotten her. Helping others. Guiding people who felt lost. And suddenly Jordan realized something important. Sometimes the people who have suffered the most, understand kindness better than anyone else. The narrator's voice slowly rises over the scene. Life has a strange way of revealing the truth when we least expect it. Jordan folded the letter gently. He placed it in his jacket pocket, as if it were something valuable he never wanted to lose. Tonight, the narrator continued, a wedding meant to celebrate love between two people became something far greater. Jordan stood up, looking once more at the garden where everything had changed. It became a reminder that every stranger we judge, carries a story we do not know. Jordan thought about the moment Naomi walked into the wedding hall. Hungry. Tired. Judged by everyone around her. If he had reacted the same way the others did, he might never have discovered the truth. He might never have found his sister again. And sometimes, the narrator said softly, the smallest act of kindness can open a door that changes many lives. Jordan looked toward the address written in Naomi's letter. A quiet determination appeared in his eyes. Because now he understood what she meant. Helping people wasn't something that should happen only on special occasions. It should be a way of living. The narrator's voice gently addresses the audience. So the next time you see someone struggling, remember Naomi's story. Before judging, ask yourself one question. What if their story is something you simply haven't heard yet? Jordan took one final look at the quiet garden before walking toward the gate. And somewhere in the city beyond those streets, a new chapter was waiting to begin. Narrator, closing. And maybe, just maybe, the next act of kindness will come from you.